Hey guys, I'm back at my house and I want to tell you the full account of the story in Daniel 3. If you pull out your Bible, you can look in the Old Testament for the book of Daniel, and it will tell you about three men named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But as I said before, there was a great king named Nebuchadnezzar, and he decided that he wanted to have a statue built that was 90 feet tall. And remember, we looked at the building at Southern Miss, and it was big, a really big building. So just like that, 90 feet tall, Nebuchadnezzar said, he called together all of the leaders and the governors and the counselors, all of the important people, and he said, I have made a law that whenever you hear music, anyone in the land, whenever you hear the music, you are to bow down and you are to worship my statue that has been made. No one knows exactly what this statue looked like. It could have been an image of him. It could have been just a plain statue. I don't know. But I know that 90 feet tall, you would have been standing there looking at it like this. And so when the music played, everyone had the decision to make. Am I going to bow down and worship this? Or am I going to serve the God in my heart, the God that created me? So the day came when all of the leaders gathered together and all of the people, we're talking hundreds of people, probably could have been thousands. I'm really not sure. But when the music played, they all bowed down and they worshiped the statue, except there were three men named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They refused. They said, we are not going to bow down. Now, there was one problem with this. Nebuchadnezzar said, anyone who does not bow down to my statue will be thrown into a fiery furnace. I don't know about you, but I don't like fire. It's very hot. And to know to be thrown into a furnace would be really hot. Not a good day. And so they decided, they purposed in their heart that they were not going to worship this statue. Well, it presented a problem. And of course, the people who bowed down to it noticed that they didn't, so they went to the king and said, hey, king, these guys, they're not following your rules. You said anybody has to bow down to this statue every time they hear the music, and if they don't, they will be thrown into the furnace. And so the king had them called in, and he said, is this true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? If you will bow down to my statue when you hear the music, good. If you want, I will throw you into the furnace. And he said, and what God can save you from my hands? One of my favorite verses in the whole Bible is in Daniel 3. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answer, and they say, O king, we don't have to answer you in this. Our God will save us. He is able. But even if he doesn't save us, we will not bow down to your statue. We will not worship this statue. Well, Nebuchadnezzar got very, very angry. And he had the furnace heated up 7 times hotter. And so they bound the men. I want you to remember that word bound. That means they tied them up in probably their jackets or their coats. So they couldn't get their arms out. And I imagine this was probably a pretty scary, intimidating time for the men. So they bring them up to the furnace. And it said they dropped them in there. And they started to walk around. And after a few minutes, Nebuchadnezzar stands up and he says, look, look. And he calls for his governors. He said, didn't we throw 3 men into the furnace? They say, yes. And he says, but I see 4 men walking around. They're unbound. They're unbound. And they're not hurt by the fire. And he said, the 4th one looks like the son of a god. And so he had them called out. He said, come out, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Come out, come out, come out. And when they came out, it says their hair was not singed. They weren't burned. They were not harmed by the fire in any way. And when they went in, they were all tied and caught up. But when they were dropped in, they were loose and they were walking around. And I don't know, someone was in there with them. Maybe it was an angel. Some people have said it was God himself in the fire. I'm not sure. But what I want you to remember is that God says that he sent his son and he calls him Emmanuel, God with us. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had a big challenge in front of them. They said, we don't want to serve that statue. We want to serve the one true God. And so they stood firm despite what could have been a really, really bad consequence. And there was a consequence. They had to go in front of the fire, the furnace, and then they were dropped in, but the Lord was with them. And after that, Nebuchadnezzar made a new law that said anyone who worships any god besides the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would have severe punishment. And so Nebuchadnezzar ended up saying, their God is God Most High. He's God over all of the earth. And so a really powerful story came out of this. But I imagine that it was really kind of scary for the men who were living through it. And, today we just pick up a Bible and we can read. We can flip over and say, okay, Noah built the ark and it rained for 40 days. And then after that he got off and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went to the fiery furnace and they got out. But they didn't know. They didn't have the end of the story. They were walking through it just like we are right now. We're dealing with coronavirus and all kinds of different things. And I know you at home are hearing things and you don't know what they mean. And it can just be kind of overwhelming. It can be scary. It can be sad. But I want you to know that even though our schedules have changed, life is different, God is still with us. He is powerful and he is a lot bigger than the building that we looked at earlier. He's bigger than a statue. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to worship something that I can make with my own hands. That's not worthy of worship. The God who created us to know him, to speak to him, and to hear his voice. He speaks to us in our heart if we will just be still and if we'll listen. So I'm going to say a prayer for us today. Lord, help us remember that we don't always bow down before statues, but many times we choose other things to serve besides you. I pray that in this time, if it's scary or lonely or however we're feeling, if we're sad, that we'll talk to someone. And if no one is around, God, you are always there. And all we have to do is say, Jesus, I need you. I need your help. I'm afraid. Would you help me? Lord, I know you'll be there. I thank you for my friends at BDS, and I pray your protection over all of us and our families, and help us know how to be a blessing to others who are having a really hard time right now too. We love you, Jesus, and we thank you that you never, ever leave us. We know that you are the one true God, and you are worthy of our worship. Amen. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Hang tight, and I hope to see you again soon, okay? Have a good weekend. Bye.